Hello and welcome to Prime Podcast. My guest today is Rahul Garg, founder and CEO of Moglix. I'm super excited to have you on the podcast, Rahul. Welcome.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Exciting to be part of it and happy to share whatever about our journey and the learning so far.
Absolutely. So let's jump right in, Rahul. So tell us a little bit about just your own journey and the starting of Moglix, and then we can dive in after that.
Yeah, so I started in 2015. I think the thought process was the entrepreneurial bug was there for probably 5 years before that, and multiple attempts at starting up, which I couldn't. So eventually I said, like, let's just resign and be unemployed because that might be the right kick you need to start up as an entrepreneur. So that's what I exactly did. I resigned, and said I'm going to start a company. And there were like a couple of spaces I was super excited about. And as I went through it, I felt like this B2B commerce needs to go the kind of transformation B2C has delivered. And that's pretty much the birth of Moglix. Simple, one single line that we will transform B2B in a way that everything should happen using transaction platforms, and it should be done with the same level of ease, comfort, delivered at the doorstep of a manufacturing sector, infrastructure companies, heart of the Indian economy. And we will try to attempt this problem, which didn't seem easy at that point. And still, I think we are way ahead from getting to the goal that we aspire to get to as a company.
So I'm curious, did you kind of very quickly narrow it down to the opportunity set, which was the start of Moglix, or did you actually try a few things before you coming onto this?
No, I think so. I never started anything else. I think it was a 3 month period of kind of like sleeping with the problem, and I think two things kind of like eliminated other options because as an entrepreneur, I feel this is going to be a long journey, and you got to be excited every day. Like you have to have the day one feeling for tens of years, right? And
Hmm.
therefore, you have to pick a problem that you feel either you feel close to a customer, close to the mission, close to the supplier ecosystem, something like that, right? And I felt I grew up in a household in Faridabad, which was all like manufacturing folks, and I always felt like we were as a country missing out, and China just like took the shine away in manufacturing from India, and we could have done a lot better. And I felt like this is a problem which I've grown as a child, and maybe if I feel that there is also an entrepreneurial opportunity, then I can probably continue to remain motivated about it for a longer period of time. I mean, many a times there are business problems which are exciting, but this sort of touches you more internally and gives you that motivation in the good or a bad time to keep going on.
Well, so then could you, to set the context here for our talk, what is Moglix? How would you describe it?
In simple terms, Moglix is a B2B commerce platform for manufacturing and infrastructure companies. Just like we are used to having a one stop of a Flipkart or a Amazon deliver any product that we want to our houses as a consumer, we do it for manufacturing companies. So you pick up a automotive company, steel company, mining company, you go and say, like, I want to be the one-stop solution for Hero Corp. I want to be doing that for Tata Steel. I want to do it for some of the vaccine companies, some of the chemical companies. That's what Moglix is about. And obviously, as for many marketplaces and commerce companies in India, you end up building full stack. You got to build the entire warehousing, supply chain, technology, and solve through the various elements in the process of how do you create this market. And we I think in the last 7 years, we have pretty much not just created the entire space, but a lot of the rails around it, because it's kind of like a second, third order problem to solve, we feel, and therefore a little more complicated than consumer. I mean, consumer is complicated in its own shape or form, but we feel that the templates for B2B are less developed globally, so your ability to learn from global counterparts is low, so therefore we become actually a unique B2B disruptor globally.
So just to take an example, you mentioned Hero Motorcorp. So let's say automobile manufacturer, could be Hero, could be Maruti, could be anybody else. If they want to source a part, they want to source the exhaust or the tires or whatever it is, they would potentially come to Moglix and say, hey, look, this is what we're looking for. And I would like it developed, shipped and so forth.
Yeah, many times we don't realize, I mean, these companies buy tens of thousands of products, right? So it's like and I take an example like as a consumer, I see car as a car, right? I mean, like it's one single SKU, right? I mean, maybe the colors and shades and love it off if I decided on the model, right? But if you look inside a car, I mean, like it's tens of thousands of products, and we can't say that we can solve for all of them, but we take a sliver of category of products which we start to sort of enable for many of these manufacturing plants running sort of heavy machinery, heavy engineering, tool rooms, and various complex processes to get to that finished car. And we solve for that sort of category of products becoming a one-stop solution, which in many shape or form from a supply market, people also think of it as what is the like of a wholesale bazaar, like a Chavdi bazaar or a Lohar Chal in Mumbai, or and so how do you sort of visualize these markets in a modern India context? Will they remain like that, or will they be transformed, and will they be digitized, and will they be sort of enabled using technology rather than the sort of ad hoc nature in which those markets function in past?
So as a B2B marketplace, Rahul, is it fair to say that it is a small b, which is on one side, and a large B on another side, meaning that the suppliers are probably smaller and significantly smaller in scale than the folks who are actually doing the procurement? Is that the right way to look at it?
I mean, technically, you would say that the buyers will be from a small manufacturing plant to the largest of manufacturing plant. What
Okay.
you cater to at different points in the journey, how do you design your GTM, those things might differ. But invariably, it is almost like saying that a consumer, would you say that I only serve it to a urban consumer, I don't serve it to a tier 2 consumer? Like, so yes, the GTM matters. I mean, today we do service more of the large enterprises as a company, but because the SMEs in India are extremely fragmented, how do you design a GTM? How do you sort of make sure that your CAC to LTV kind of metrics make sense, things like that? And typically on the supply side, again, I think, well, the default is the small guy, but you would also think like a company like Havells would be selling through our platform. Now, they may sell through a smaller supplier or a distributor sometimes versus selling directly, but invariably your supply is like a 1 million SKU, which can be coming from a large brand or a small brand. And they might be supplying directly, or they may be supplying through a stockist partner of theirs, right? So it again has a variation of a large and small. We do tend up from a brand perspective. We do work with the largest of brands also on the supply side, sometimes with the though the end fulfillment partners can be SMEs.
Got it. Okay. They are actually the ones who are procuring it from so there's another leg to that supply chain from that standpoint. So one of the challenges in marketplaces are fundamentally very good concepts because you're removing market inefficiency, which exists. However, one of the largest challenges in two-sided marketplaces is actually just getting started, right? And having liquidity in the systems. I'm just really curious to know, how did you start? So you said 3 months you went ahead and said, yes, all this makes sense. But then how do you get the transactions flowing through this?
I mean, I think there's no magical answer. I think it's like you need but I mean, in our case, we felt you need a critical supply before the demand guy will take you seriously. It's like right to play and right to win kind of a dimension, right? So most marketplaces, I feel that the demand will not come to you unless you have just like you think of software products as MVP products, you would think that there is a minimum supply that you need to create before you have a right to walk into a door and talk to a customer that you can be the platform from where they can buy products, right? So I think that's sort of like the simple thought process we had, and I mean that's how we went about: build minimum supply, then go to the demand, then build the demand, then build the supply. then go build the demand. So I mean, like, then you start the flywheel, right? I mean, like, you're like going back and forth on building one versus the other. But yeah, I think you don't have and particularly B2B is a fairly sort of, to certain extent, I feel you're not flirting with the customer. I think in consumer, you can a little bit flirt with the customer and probably evaporate. And I mean, like B2B, when people talk to you, they want a certain level of credibility. They want a certain level of seriousness because it is like a professional procurement guy or so on and so forth. If you don't do a job well, I mean, he can get fired or there can be line stoppages and things like that. And so he doesn't want to work with anybody who he thinks is not credible enough or uh, sort of allow that. So you got to earn your right to play before you start to get into the zone of right to win.
Fair enough. Now, I would think that for that to happen, once you aggregate a certain critical mass of supply, the suppliers have to be then a little bit patient with getting demand, because they're not going to get an order every week for sure. Because how did you manage that? Because that's what when we look at marketplaces and other verticals, you can end up putting one side of the marketplace and then you start building the other. But some of this one side which you have built, typically on the supply side in B2B supply aggregation, starts churning because you're just not able to. And they say, well, I kind of like put my inventory there, but I didn't see anything. So sorry, I'm run out of motors.
I mean, those are challenges. I mean, that you have to solve. I mean, like, it's not like the first supplier would have remained at his motivation. And then I think the question also becomes is there a downside for them? I mean, to be on your platform. If you're taking care of the downside, I mean, they feel this is incremental. Everyone wants more sale, right? So I go back to that basic, like whether when you hold a conversation with the supplier, like if you're on my platform, you can only get additional revenue, right? And you're not doing any effort, right? I mean, like I'm digitizing, I'm doing the catalog, all of that stuff, right? So yeah, I mean, like you'll probably spend half an hour with my supply BD guy to talk to him, understand that. And then I think at least for us, I mean, we do get benefited by the fact that the B2C revolution had happened, and therefore there was this positive suppliers. People would have seen that, okay, but the mobile phone happened or the apples happened or shoes happened or whatever, right? So I think it would have been a very different challenge for a Flipkart when they went and did it, because it was like, why should I even do anything online, right? So I was not solving for that question. I was solving for whether in my category and how will the market change
Got it.
conversation.
So if you look at the on the buyer side, what was the value proposition which you gave to the buyer? Was it you started out with saying, hey, look, you might actually have a better price, but that seems a little bit hard to pull off, given that, especially if the buyer is a large buyer, they might already be having access to negotiations which give them a decent price.
No, so I think we picked category of products which were like the pain in the ass for them. I mean, that's what you do. You say like, it goes back to the classical sort of like, what do people hate to do? Those are the ones that they want to pass it on first, right? So customers would give products that they are not able to source. I mean, like there will be like this one product SKU which they just struggle, and they don't have the patience or bandwidth to call 20 suppliers and figure out who has inventory and so on and so forth. And they will sort of like, why don't you do that stuff, right? And if you do that, then I'll give you right to play into some other stuff which is I'm able to source easily, but I still have the problem of fragmented multiple suppliers and things like that. So I think, and then you eventually have to, at least because in our case the GTM has a lot of Salesforce related element rather than the marketing oriented GTM. The key question also becomes is like, you got to make some customers who start to just give you this opportunity, right, to build and have that right to service many of these products. And I think we were lucky. We got some of these alpha customers who were somewhat emotionally vested into that we would like this industry to get transformed. I mean, like some who were objective, right, around which, and then, I mean, we were also not like we had a fairly credible team, and walking into it, I mean, normally those people in my Google context would probably take appointment and come and see me, right? So I mean, like the credibility in life somewhat helps you, right? So in various shapes or form that you may not imagine otherwise, right? So I think that's how we got lucky and got some early customers, and then you get the flywheel keep on going like that.
Yeah, it reminds me of how eBay started, right? They started with antiques. This is like hard to source things. Some little, actually Beanie Babies, right? This little toy which was a big fad during one Christmas, and nobody could find them in stores, and so people started selling those on eBay, and that's how the first flywheel started there before becoming a lot more generic. So I think not too dissimilar in this case. I guess the equivalent of Beanie Baby might be a particular bearing or a particular motor or a particular flange or whatever it is that the manufacturer needs, and just nobody's making it. That's fascinating. What other in which other ways do you think B2B differs from B2C, right? By the way, just to clarify, can consumers also go and buy on Moglix, or is primarily a B2B platform?
I mean, we have opened it. I mean, like that's not the target. I mean, like probably not many consumers go out and figure out buying a bearing on the platform, or sometimes even buying an MCB or things like that. So we do have, however, some SKUs which people like to buy, and sometimes there are people who can be buying fans, people who can be buying because electricals is a category for us. I mean, there are people now who are also buying power tools or hand tools or things like that for their own home use or things like that. So we do have, yes, customers can go and buy on moglix.com, but that's not our core GTM, because they will do point purchases based on specific need. Whereas the core customer for us to go after is like customers who are buying 100 times a month from us, right? That's the key sort of a problem that we want to solve.
So coming back to my to the question then, like how if somebody is looking at it and understands B2C marketplaces, how is the buyer here, or maybe even the supplier, but maybe perhaps mostly the buyer, different than when you're looking at a B2C marketplace? Like, what are some of the aspects which are different?
So I think first you have to understand this is consumer is a far more single decision maker. A B2B is typically a multi decision maker. If you go to large organizations, which means like you got to be more thorough about the decision, and the implications of making a wrong decision are slightly more sort of like professional for people, right? I mean, like if you bought a wrong t-shirt and you got the return, probably there's no downside per se to it, right? But if you got a wrong bearing and the plant blew up, right? So there are ramifications in your professional job. So I think that firstly the psychology changes. Second, I think I was joking yesterday with some of the folks I was sitting around. The typical TG probably for a consumer today is a 15-year-old to 45-year-old, right? Maybe that is like 90-95% of the people who buy on e-commerce platform, right? I mean, like we talked about Zomato having whatever 5 to 10 million people contributing 80% of the revenue, things like that, right? So in our case, actually, it starts from 35 and goes to 65, right? So suddenly you are also in a very different set of age profile and people making decisions, right? I mean, like many of our customers have probably not bought on Amazon, Flipkart. Their kids have bought on that, or their spouses have bought on that, right? But they haven't bought, right? So it's a little bit of a generational change as well, right? Because they know about it, but they're like, don't do it by themselves, right? So that's, I think, the second. I think so the personas of people differ. The third, I think, it's typically not an impulse, right? Like I can't be incentivized to buy a product if I don't need the product.
Great
Right?
point.
And if I need the product, I need to buy the product. Right? Then I'm also not thinking like I'll buy next month. I need to buy a product, I need to buy a product today. Right? Maybe like a couple of days here and there, doesn't matter. But like I need to buy the product, right? So I think those things start to, and then business processes, how they buy, how do they run their GST, how do they run their capital flow, all of that starts to become very, very different in a B2B context versus consumer, how you run your supply chains and the ETA demand. So I think in many shape or form, while the core concept remains the same, the operationalization of the concept at a zoom out view, it may seem like, yeah, you also operate warehouse, you also run logistics, you also run technology. But when you look under that, I mean, like, it's completely different. It is, it has pretty much concepts. As soon as you go to 100 feet level, it's completely different from a consumer marketplace being created in every single of those sort of value prop that you're creating.
And now that you mentioned it, I think that it does make sense. I can imagine that this is not just marketing led. You said it's sales led more than marketing led, and that makes sense. You're kind of convincing the buyer that a pretty critical piece of their operations can actually be relied upon here. Second, you're not necessarily actually looking for the cheapest cost, although cost would be a consideration. Just paraphrasing what you're saying, you are looking for the right product available at the right time in a very predictable way. Because it can be a small product, but my entire assembly line might actually be predicated on that.
Correct.
And so the cost savings might come
And
in a very
my
different
chances
way.
of, if I'm a procurement guy, if I bought like maybe 2% more expensive, it would not lead to me getting fired. But if the product didn't come or product will go up, I'll get fired.
That makes sense. Yeah. So essentially, the SLAs are just much tighter in terms of just delivery and so forth. So does that actually change the way you think about logistics and warehousing and so forth?
Yeah, it does change because we realize all third-party supply chain in India is shit, right? So basically, you got to build it yourself, right? It's almost like the e-cart and Amazon transportation. They just don't believe that the third parties can do a great job, right? And for whatever it's true, but I think logistics and supply chain in India is far underdeveloped. I mean, you take a trucking industry, it will be like super fragmented. The percentage of organized is very low. You take the warehousing, and then you look at the different configurations of how, because we are a large country, but with the slower nature of the truck and the speed in past, which is changing now, with the configuration of what is the volume of products getting sort of shift from one location to the other, the entire processes around it with GST went through a change as well. So I think those nuances make it actually quite a lot of movement from an unorganized to an organized kind of supply chain infrastructure that you need to create.
So what would be some of the largest categories on Moglix today?
Actually, it's interesting. I mean, like our value proposition has been like almost like A to Z store, right? And in our case, because we started with the difficult categories, the pride is primarily that it is fragmented. Like we have 50 plus large categories, and they are all sort of fairly well represented as pretty much the size of the TAM of each of those categories, kind of a thing, right? So so it's a hugely fragmented category base, and it's not like electronics where you would say like in a consumer you would feel that 50% is probably electronics or mobiles and laptops and TVs kind of a thing. We don't have that. We just have like this electrical tools, bearings, power transmission, packaging. I mean, all these categories which are bought through the platform, and not a heavy index on a single category at all.
I'm just curious, I cannot help asking, like, what is like the bulkiest item which has ever been ordered on Moglix, like the hugest thing?
I don't know the hugest. I mean, like from early days now, I don't somehow track that metric. So, but I remember early on we had like few hundred tons of fasteners that we shipped. I mean, like
Whoa.
basically, so we do something like I think 20 to 30 metric tons of shipment every month. So it's actually pretty large, and in terms of shipment volume that we deliver. But we have variations where you could have a small cutting tool box which goes into your pocket and might be actually like $50,000 with that small pocket of cutting tools, all the way to like this extreme example, right? So it's not as, therefore again, I mean, I can't emphasize, we don't have that homogeneous nature of like I have this iPhone 14, which I will ship 1 million SKUs, right? I mean, I don't have that. Fundamentally as a construct of the business. We thrive on the heterogeneous nature of SKUs and the shipments and the nuances that happen across the industry.
Let me just bubble like one step above, right, on the macro manufacturing trend, right? So there is a lot of talk and I guess action on the ground about the China plus one strategy, which various large manufacturers, global are looking at, right? And hence part of the global supply chain is moving to India and to some other smaller, Southeast Asian countries like Vietnam as well. Are you seeing that perceptibly from your standpoint, because you're in a great vantage point to sort of see the impact of that? So just would like to get your thoughts.
So the first thing is, I think that opportunity is real. There is global talks. There are people attempting to do that. Walmart has it declared that they want to source the products from India almost 3x from what they used to source till 2022 in the next 5 years. So I think that intent is there. Execution attempt in the country is also highest in versus the 8-year history that I've seen. So since the last 18 months, that execution on the ground in terms of capex we think is the lead indicator. Like, are people increasing the capacity of manufacturing in the country, right? And both for domestic as well for export. So that is happening. Are we able to capture the rightful share of India? I feel we are far from it. I think we have the right to the global supply chain. We should be like probably neck to China. And like we are like probably 1/20th of that, right? So I think how far we will get to the rightful share, we should as a country aspire towards. I think that will take a while. But I think, are we slowly chipping away? The answer is yes.
And if what you're saying is correct, which is it's a leading indicator, you're actually seeing CapEx on the ground, then you will probably, and we as consumers will start seeing the impact of it 2 to 3 years down the road, right? Because the capacity comes online, the supply chain, the products start moving in the market, et cetera, et cetera. So that probably would be one of the more, I think that as you look at job creation, I mean, there's a lot of conversations about job creation and so forth. And manufacturing outside of construction, manufacturing is just one of these huge categories where, which have to contribute towards the job creation.
No, absolutely. And I think it will continue to increase. I think we almost had 2 decades of loss of manufacturing for the rightful share that India should control in global supply chains. I think the next 10 years or maybe next 20 years, we will have some amount of rebalance. How much, we don't know. And I think it's also important for us to become, in many of the categories, domestic, far more self-reliant, or at least partially self-reliant than we were in past. Because our population is increasing, our GDP is increasing, our consumption is increasing, and we can't be an economy which is, for many of the products, dependent on import, right? So just, and I think that is a beautiful time to actually step up, because you say that for all the global manufacturers as well, you sort of tell them like, there's going to be like the base capacity of whatever manufacturing infrastructure you create in India, which is going to be used for just the domestic consumption itself, right? And then you can also use. So I think, and manufacturers, kind of like the global manufacturers, also like that, because they know that there's an intrinsic large domestic market they also want to cater to, right? And the policy framework, if it supports the creation on the ground versus importing for those manufacturers, I mean, like Apple is a classical case. If the policy framework enables or supports, in certain kind of sometimes also use a stick policy around it, I think you start to have that movement, right, faster. And I think that is what we are seeing I mean, the intent and direction is fastest than it was ever in the 8-year history that I have been at since I started Moglix. The question is how fast we can continue to have the momentum and what scale can we create. So it's for us the scale moment. Can we scale from like, okay, we have some capabilities. Maybe we are like in startup terminology, instead of 0 to 1, I would say we are like 0.5. Can we go from 0.5 to 100, right?
Mhm.
And do we have the right to play, right to win, right to compete? What does it mean to compete? And then can we solve for some of those operational really challenges, which sometimes may not make us the most productive manufacturing nation in the world? I mean, like Bangladesh has done a great job on apparels. Like, I mean, they've figured out some of those flywheels. So I mean, like, we have to go literally industry by industry and go for it. And like, and it needs to be right at the, I think, both the industry leaders and the political leaders, because there's a political will, there is a industry will to put capex and to fight for it, and then you need the enabling infrastructure, and then you need to sort of like motivate the entire population. Most countries which have gone from kind of a developing to a developed, there's a mass amount of population which got motivated into this economic engine creation. And I think we have seen that in the IT world. We have not seen that economic engine hunger and sort of operational enablement on ground in the next workforce in India to the extent we could actually. So I think that's where I think I continue to remain passionate. I continue to remain bullish. We'll get somewhere. I want us to get there faster and bigger, but let's see.
Well, let me say that I'm an entrepreneur, and I'm interested in manufacturing, I'm interested in B2B, doing something there. What would be your advice, both in terms of the sector, but perhaps more generally, how to go about thinking through the process of starting a business?
I would say that I'll answer the question in two parts. One is like, why do you want to be an entrepreneur? And then how do you select the space? Why should you select the space? And then are you motivated about doing that space for next 10 years, right? So I think, so the key points there, I believe, is that this is going to be a long journey. In fact, I think we have to increasingly, as the startup ecosystem, start to think of it as an infinite journey, because it's almost like meditative, therapeutic, whatever you call it, but like it's a journey and a way of life that you have adopted. It's not going to be linear. I mean, everything in life is like, if not sinusoidal, some ups and downs. Hopefully not sinusoidal. That will be
Yeah.
like catastrophic. And therefore, you need to have intrinsic motivation of why you'll continue to pursue the space and continue to remain motivated about it. Now, it's very difficult to know at it at younger age, but at least I feel for entrepreneurs who start like in 30s or things like that, they probably have a better sense. And then younger, we continue to sort of mentor and educate that it is important because it's going to be long journey. Second, I would think the opportunities in India are like just phenomenally high. I think sometimes we over-index too much on software, but I mean, like I could be setting up uh, like a waste management company. I mean, like there's so much of electronic waste that is going to get generated in the country.
Hmm.
Uh, I mean, like I was talking to entrepreneurs which are now starting to think about not just the waste that gets generated using mobile phones and laptops, but using like things like lithium-ion batteries, which will be now present with EV and so on and so forth. So there are opportunities which are far more due to the nature of how we are uh, underdeveloped in many of the physical infrastructure and physical things. I mean, there's so much opportunities, and I do seem that there is an over-indexing of the percentage of entrepreneurs trying to do another SaaS platform. But
Hmm.
I actually think that larger opportunities in the country are there and are something which is untapped and probably only available to Indian entrepreneurs, sometimes not even available to global companies. And we should make sure that those opportunities people go for and build it out. And then third, I think uh, hustle, enjoy, and build teams and around you, which are sort of as excited or motivated about what you want to pursue.
Fair enough. Well, Rahul, I mean, it is just a terrific conversation. Well, let me end with this. So, if roll back the clock, I guess you started 2015, 8 years ago, and you're talking to your younger self, uh, what what one advice would you give, knowing what you know now of this journey?
I mean, see, one, I don't live in retrospect and I don't normally think like that. But I think the advice would be, which is like start for the right reasons, which I did. So I'm not sure what advice more I can give.
Mhm.
Things take longer than sometimes you predict. Um, there are elements that you would have thought that's like typically as techies we think these problems are like too below the level we should not be solving, and they should be like, and then we start to sort of say that there's something wrong with the country and things like that. But everything that is wrong is the opportunity available to Indian entrepreneurs, right? So I mean, like it may not be available in the same shape or form in the developed markets today, right? I mean, like
Right, right.
you can't be building warehouse in US, right? I mean, like that's probably like crazy, right? Or you can't be building a trucking or a supply chain network there, right? It's probably going to be very different. So I think you have to also make sure that you don't get bogged down by many of those, because sometimes it's like you're just breaking your head and you're like, what the fuck did I do? But
Mhm.
yeah, that's the opportunity, and if you hustle through it, you'll probably build a phenomenal company.
Fair enough. To man of spirit, opportunities are duties, as they say. I
Yeah,
think you have an opportunity, you gotta fix it. Well, very well, Rahul. Terrific conversation, and all the best. I guess the journey for Moglix is just beginning, and look forward to many more successes for
yeah.
Moglix.
Yeah, thanks a lot, and have a good day, Shripati. And we'll loop. I think outside of this, this was a great conversation, but we'll connect.
Absolutely.
Dear listeners, thank you for listening to this episode of the podcast. Subscribe now on your favorite podcast app for free, and you'll be the first one to know when new episodes are available. Just search for Prime Venture Partners Podcast in Apple Podcast, Spotify, Castbox, or however you get your podcasts. Then hit subscribe. And if you have enjoyed the show, we would be really grateful if you leave us a review on Apple Podcast. To read the full transcript, find the link in the show notes.